On today's show, The Power of Profile, part 3 of this week's series on the advisor's pathway to freedom with charter life underwriter and creator of Cotton Systems, Wayne Cotton. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to Backroom Technician and Innsmouth. Let's get down to business. Well, welcome to the show, Wayne.
Thank you, Steve.
Day 3.
This is fun.
It is fun. Of course, we're talking with top of the table, core to the table, MDRT, platform speaker. You have production, and the only reason I bring it up is just so that our people know when we're talking about Wayne's thinking, his processes, your protocols, the way you go through, the way you forge all this for us to look at, it's really because it's really showed so much in your success, and you're working and gaining more production with a lot less time involved in it. That seems so weird.
Yeah, it's really interesting because work expands or contracts to fill the amount of time you give it, as said by Mike Mckenzie in The Time Trap. And I think the key is to figure out how do we condense and package time. So I'll give you a little example in my life. After coming through that big disaster that happened to me in my 12th year in the business, I decided that I wanted to raise my family in the Okanagan Valley of British Columbia. My practice was built in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I wanted to move to the Okanagan Valley, raise my kids out there. It's a beautiful valley, lakes and rivers and mountains and ski hills and wineries and orchards. It's a beautiful part of the world. And so I decided to move my family, and I moved my family 550 miles away from the office.
550 miles away.
Yeah. Now think this through for just a second. This sounds totally crazy, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you. But what happened was I had this workaholic tendency that was so huge. And that first year after that disaster, I took 180 days off, and I doubled my production. Like all of a sudden, I was in this new world. And it's also the time when I started publishing the Cotton System as well. All that started to happen in the same time frame. So I decided that I wanted to move my family and commute back to the office, 550 miles. How do you do that? 1 hour flight, 1 hour time change, $100 round trip airfare at the time. I'm talking about 1982. And so I moved my family and I flew over the Rocky Mountains each week to go home from the office, and I mentally went through the Great Divide. I brought in no clients out there. That was tough, but I made a commitment to myself I would not work in the business out there. So I did not bring any clients in 12 years of commuting. And so I had 3 days off a week, took several weeks off each year, and my production continued to go up and up and up back home, or back at the office, I should say. So I flew on Sunday night to the office. Thursday at 5 o'clock, I was on a plane going the other way. I was home in time for dinner Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. And it was a totally different world for me, a world that I absolutely fell in love with, as you can imagine. It's fabulous.
So talk to me about this. This was, to me, that was one of the, I'm thinking, here's what you just said to me, and you call that example a principle of growth.
Well, it's part of purpose, right? Getting clarity of purpose and knowing what you want. I decided that was something really important. We talked about it, we decided on it, away we went. And we rented a house out there at first and kept a condo back in Edmonton, but it turned out that it was our life and still is our life.
Now you talk about where you're doing this, you talk about building your client base.
Yeah.
And you talk about it building the right clients. So I'm assuming that we have a lot of wrong clients in our practice.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you throw stuff in there and you throw stuff in there and whatever, but what we have to understand is that the key is you can handpick your clients. I mean, that's a choice. There's no shortage of prospects. There's prospects everywhere. There's shortage of methods of getting in front of the right ones. But when you get in front of the right people, the people that fit your best case scenario, that fit your profile, which is principle number 2, is knowing your profile. Once you find people that fit your profile, the key now is to prospect for people that look like that. Okay? And so when you're on profile, we all talk about ideal client profile, right? You hear that word bandied around. A lot of coaches talk about ideal client profile. And that's used as a mechanism for focusing. So it's like the 80-20 rule, a Pareto principle, right? So 20% of effort generates 80% of your results. We all know about that. But there's something far more than that. That's 80-20 squared. 80-20 squared is where you take the 20% where you do the better level of business. You take that 20%, you square it. So what do you got now? You got 4%. 20% of 20% is 4%. Now let's look at, this is called hyper-focus, right? Most people talk about focusing. This is hyper-focus. With hyper-focus, you take that 4%, and now you get 80% of the 80%. That's 80-20 squared. So you got 4% equals 64% of your revenue. Now, once again, you couldn't have proven this to me before I did it, but I did it. And so what you do now is you realize that a very small amount of your time generates a lot of revenue. When you twig to that and you start to realize that your profile is really important, all of a sudden you start to say, oh my goodness, I got to get on track with my profile and stop all this other nonsense. One of my customers over in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Jerry, when he's on profile, his average revenue per hour, not per case, but per hour, is just over $1,500 per hour. When he's off profile, he's running between $300 and $500 per hour. When you think of the difference over a period of a year with the amount of effort and time you've got to do business and be face-to-face with people, you better be on track with the right people.
So this is huge. You really like this power of profiling, and you have to define that. What if you're a regular advisor, decent practice, but he goes, I don't even know who the right clients are?
Yeah, and that's a challenge. I mean, in our next segment, we'll talk about how do we determine best case scenario. But I think the key is that once you understand exactly who you're looking for, then everything else falls in line. Like all the program that you deliver to those people, your processes, everything falls in line once you get clarity of your profile. So you got to know who you want to see so you can say no to who you don't want to see. And for a lot of people, that's almost sacrilegious. Say, are you kidding me? Turn down business? Yes, absolutely. Because when you get caught up in all that stuff, then you can't focus on the right stuff. This doesn't take any time to implement, for goodness sakes. This isn't like you got to wait 3 years to find people that fit your profile. Once you've got the total identity of exactly where you belong, you start prospecting right now, and you've got some people in your clientele already who fit that profile, but you haven't done the business with them yet. You start right there.
We come back from the break, we're going to continue with Wayne on this whole issue of profiling. I think it's just fascinating. We'll be right back. It's not how much money you make for your clients, it's how much money they get to keep, especially in retirement. But retirement income could cause Social Security benefits to be taxed. One tax advantage alternative is life insurance designed as a non-modified endowment contract that can generate tax-free income without taxing Social Security benefits. These contracts offer differing funding options depending upon your client's risk tolerance. For more information on how life insurance can be part of your retirement planning, just email me at steve@downtobusiness.tv. Brought to you by Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. Well, welcome back to the second segment. Of course, we're with Wayne Cotton. We're talking about the power of profiling. And one of the things I've heard you say in other situations and speaking is you don't want to be a strategist, or I'm sorry, you do want to be a strategist, not an opportunist. Talk to me about that, because I always thought I'm supposed to be an opportunist.
Yeah, it's most people in our business are opportunists. Like we see something, boom, away we go. We see something else, away we go. We hear an idea, oh yeah, we got to do that too. Yeah, we got to do that. Speaker comes to town, says you got to do this, we can do this. The next one says you got to do that, we got to do that. And so we're spinning in all directions, right? Trying to do all these things. When you become a strategist, you slow down, you know exactly what you're looking for and what you're doing, and you stop being an opportunist. Now, it takes a little while to get opportunistic thinking out of your blood, because we're all built that way, right? But when you realize how much more you can accomplish when you become a strategist, like once you see that as a strategist you can accomplish way more, you can do it in less time, have more freedom, more fun, you start to see it. Now listen, as you've said before, my background is advisor, right? I'm not a trained coach. I'm a guy who did it. And I find that lots of times, you get all these ideas coming in all the time of all the things you should be doing. But my belief is you need to bring it down to mature simplicity. Let's simplify things so we can get a lot more accomplished. That leads us to this whole concept of profiling in best case scenario. Now
you have a kind of a top 10 Cotton profile idea, right?
Yeah.
And is that on your website, or where are you posting?
No, I teach it in some classes.
So it's actually a course.
Oh yeah, and I teach it to people that are already customers of using our system, because then they can really apply it. But best case scenario came right after that disaster zone in 1981 that I've talked about before. And I woke up, first thing that happened was I went out for breakfast by myself the next morning after my home was gone, everything was gone, right? I just looked horrible. I thought I was going to have to go bankrupt. And I went out for breakfast the next morning, and I had a 3x5 card in my pocket. It was the only thing that was left in the house when I did that last walkthrough, and I had this 3x5 card. And I was in a restaurant, I opened it up, and I read it, and it said, if you got a problem, make it a procedure, and it won't be a problem anymore. Ben Feldman said it. That's where I learned it. I heard it from Ben. And if you got a problem, make it a procedure, it won't be a problem anymore. And I read the first part, if you got a problem, and I laughed out loud, ha! Because I had more problems than everybody in the whole city combined. At least that's how it felt to me, right? And but when I read the rest, make it a procedure, I realized I'd never procedurized the business. I was just being an opportunist, running around all over the place, trying to be all things to all people all the time, and it hadn't worked. So at that point, I decided, okay, I need to procedurize my business. And that's really where some of these principles came from, is in that period of time. Well, one of the things that happened was, that was the first thing, was problem process. The second lesson that happened the very next morning, or that afternoon, pardon me, the very same afternoon, I had 16 filing drawers, four-drawer filing cabinets, that had all my information retrieval system in it. Today you'd have it all on a hard drive, right? But I had this information retrieval system that had all kinds of stuff in there, and I took it out to the city dump, and I dumped the whole thing. And I went back home with only my client files and a few things that I had personally developed. And so that was the second thing, was dump the junk. So convert problems to procedures. Number 2 is dump the junk. Number 3, the next morning I woke up with a phrase on my mind. The phrase was best case scenario. Best case scenario, best case scenario. What does that mean, best case scenario? And I went downstairs and I started making some notes. I started writing some things. I came out with a 20-point checklist, which now is 24 points long, of identifying the characteristics of your client. Now what I did was I pulled my top 10 revenue generating client files, because I knew I couldn't chase big cases anymore because they're fraught with problems. And big cases take a big risk. You're taking a big risk with your income, right? And so a lot of people who are elephant hunters, you know, they lose seriously when they keep missing some of these cases. Yeah, once in a while they might get one, and all it does is whets their appetite to go and be an elephant hunter more. That's not what you want to do. You want to work within your zone of competency right now. And same with being a rabbit hunter. You can't afford the time to run around the countryside doing all this little stuff. So best case scenario. So I did this 20-point evaluation, now 24, and what it has, half of them are characteristics of the client. So it looks at the age range, it looks at things like the marital status, it looks at the ages of the kids, it looks at the occupation, it looks at the income level. You know, we're looking at the situation that relates to that client, the asset level, the type of assets, the geographical locations, a lot of things that fall in that category. So you got the characteristics of the client. Then you do the characteristics of the sale. So those were your top 10, you lay them out, and you say, okay, so what happened when I met with those people? Because you can figure out your similar 7 just from the top 10, the characteristics of the client. So you're looking for what are the characteristics of my ideal client profile, or better yet, my best case scenario, because best case scenario is drilling much deeper. So once you've got that, now we look at the characteristics of the sale. What are all the things that happen when I met with those people? And you start to see the lights go on when you do this, and all of a sudden you see, okay, there is my profile, that's my best case scenario, that's where I do my best work. Right now, without having to educate, organize, analyze, computerize, or anything else, I know what to do because I've been there 7 times before. I just need to look for number 8, number 9, number 10 that look exactly the same.
And once you understand that, then you prospect to the profile.
Absolutely.
You're not prospecting for prospects. You're prospecting to the profile.
Leads, schmeeds. That's just nonsense. You know, I mean, it's like trying to take a drink of water from a fire hose. You got all this stuff coming at you all the time. You got to narrow it down to what you're really looking for. That's the key. So it isn't about creating this huge flow. It's about creating the right flow of the right people at the right pace, the right time, so that you can handle it properly and effectively. Your production can go way up in doing that. I've watched people go out and triple their production in a single year by applying these principles I'm talking about. It's absolutely huge.
This is huge, Wayne. I got to say, these are important ideas that every advisor can add to his practice.
Oh, totally. And right now, like it doesn't have to take a long time to do this. I mean, you know, when I met with this group of people in my Pathway to Freedom workshop, I mean, it was like lights going on. Even though they'd been following me for many years, they were taking snippets of this and snippets of that. But now we brought it all together so they could see where everything worked in synchronicity. Those guys went home just saying, wow, look what I can do now. And I think that's the key, is that we're not about just doing a 10% growth each year. Let's do some exponential growth. And you know, in 1 year, I went from 6 to 9 times MDRT. That's $500,000 in today's dollars. I didn't work 1 more minute that second year, not 1 more minute. I tweaked a few things in my principles, and I went up by $500,000 in revenue. The other thing I did was drop my overhead by over 20%. So I mean, what I'm talking about here is really powerful.
Listen, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, before moving forward with any of the ideas on our show, always consult your tax advisor, legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance officer. Missed an episode? Just hop out to our video archives. And remember, you could be wiser as an educated advisor. I'm Steve Savant.